Would you like to do everything you need to do in QuickBooks Online, but faster and easier? Would you rather download or import the transactions into your QuickBooks Online rather than spending all day typing them in yourself one by one? Well, if that's the case, then you need to take this course, Bank Feeds and Importing Transactions into QuickBooks Online. My name is Mark Smolin, and I personally guarantee you the clearest possible explanation for every possible topic or issue that you need to learn to benefit from using the Bank Feeds feature in QuickBooks Online. This amazing feature will give you the ability to approve each transaction within 1 second. And 2 seconds later, you can make sure it's classified correctly so that all the transactions go in much faster than any person can type them in. This amazing feature will give you the ability to record any of the transaction types that you've already been working with. You can even apply a particular deposit to a customer's open invoice, or apply a payment that you made to a particular vendor's bill. In fact, you can even track your costs by client or customer by using this Bank Feeds feature. And you will be amazed at the safeguards that are already in this feature that help prevent you from duplicating transactions that you recorded by yourself when you go to download the new transactions from your bank. That's how great this feature is, and that's how great this video is, and how much it's going to help you. So I suggest you watch a little bit of this video each day right here on YouTube, and if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section below. Believe me, by the time you're finished, you will be an absolute expert in the Bank Feeds feature in QuickBooks Online. Thank you for signing up for this very special new course that's going to give you everything you need to know and do to be able to take full advantage of the Bank Feeds feature in QuickBooks Online. This course will give you the ability to easily download and import any type of transaction that comes from your credit card or bank account. And you will easily be able to take advantage of every possible feature in the QuickBooks Online Bank Feeds. And this course is guaranteed to give you the clearest possible explanation for every one of those features. Now, if you want to learn along with us, you don't necessarily have to follow along step by step. But for those of you who do want to follow along step by step, there are materials that you can download and import so that you can repeat everything you see in the video and do the same thing in your account so that you can see right in front of you exactly what happens, and it will enhance the learning. So if you look under this video, down in the description field, under the table of contents, you will get the link to sign up for a blank, brand new, free QuickBooks Online account that you can use just for this course. And right under those links are the links to download the files that you will import to your QuickBooks Online account, just like you see me do in the video, so that you can follow along and repeat my actions exactly. Once you're all set up, you will see how we add transactions from the review list right into your QuickBooks Online account. You'll see how we approve them and reclassify them to make sure that all information about the transaction is correct before it gets recorded into your final books and records. And you're going to be amazed at the matching feature that's included right here in the Bank Feeds Center. You see, it's the matching feature that gives you the ability to prevent any duplicate transactions, because we all know that sometimes you're recording things yourself, and sometimes those things also get downloaded from the bank or the credit card company. We don't want to have any duplicates, so we'll easily master the matching feature together. Then you'll see how you can apply any of the deposits that downloaded to any of the customer's open invoices. I'm going to show you the same thing on the other side with vendors. You'll be able to see how any of the expenses you paid that get downloaded into your QuickBooks Online can be easily applied to any of the vendor's unpaid bills, so that both your unpaid bills report for vendors and your open invoice report for customers will be accurate to the last penny. Then we'll see how you can actually track your expenses by customer right within the QuickBooks Online feature that I'm going to show you. And within tracking by customer, you can even mark some of those items as billable so that you can send them an invoice later and bill them for the expense that was downloaded into the QuickBooks Online Bank Feeds feature. And the greatest thing of all that we're going to show you, that I'm going to save as the grand finale, is setting up something called rules. And rules are really the best part of working with the QuickBooks Online Bank Feeds feature. You see, rules give you the ability to have QuickBooks Online record transactions automatically so you don't have to think about them or do anything. Any of the transactions that you have regularly, you can tell QuickBooks Online exactly how they need to be recorded. And if you're confident that it works the first time, that means that you'll never have to think about those transactions again. And any transaction that you set up with a rule, you will never spend 1 second of your time putting in. That's really the greatest thing about this feature. So how does it work to make everything go smoothly with all the safeguards and conveniences that go along with this feature? Well, try to imagine over here are your bank records that get downloaded or imported from the bank. And all the way over here are your actual QuickBooks Online records with the transactions and the reports in your QuickBooks Online. Now, what's between them is something called the Bank Feeds Review List. And what actually happens is that the transactions either get downloaded or imported to the review list first. Once they're there, you are required to approve the transaction before you allow it to go from the review list and get permanently recorded into your QuickBooks Online records. Now, in addition to approving a transaction that's valid, you also have to make sure that the account category classification is correct. So for the payments that downloaded, you have to make sure that you assign the correct expense account so QuickBooks Online knows, is this expense for supplies or is this expense for utilities? And it has to be correct before it goes from the review list and gets permanently recorded into your QuickBooks Online. Same thing for the deposits. You have to make sure that the proper income account is assigned so that when it gets recorded from the review list into your permanent QuickBooks Online records, your profit and loss reflects the income from the proper places. And of course, any of my YouTube students are my friends. So if you have any issue regarding doing the course, downloading or importing, or even following along, don't be shy to leave me a question in the comments section below. I always get back to my YouTube fans very fast because I want your learning experience to be both easy and fun. And now, without further delay, let's start the setup of this course.
Chapter 4. Importing the Setup Lists.
So the first skill we will learn is how to import the setup lists. This means we need a list of vendors to choose when we classify our transactions, and the chart of accounts itself is also a list. Now, importing these two lists is very, very simple, but in order for them to work, I should first mention what's required of them so that they import into your QuickBooks Online account like that. The two things that must be true about the file that you are importing is first, the extension of the file, meaning the file format, must be .csv. And that's very easy to save it as a CSV file if you're using Microsoft Excel. And the second thing you need to know is that each column of data that you're going to import with each of the list items must be formatted inside Excel specifically as general format. And as long as the file is CSV, and as long as the data format of the column is general as compared to all the other choices of formatting, then the list should import without a problem. But actually, there's one column and only one column that will not be formatted as general type, and that's the date column. The date column must be formatted as date. And I recommend that the specific date format that you choose is 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, and 4 digits for the year. That's the format of date I choose, and I never have trouble when I import the file into QuickBooks Online. And all the other columns should be formatted as general. So if you're watching this video in a browser, right below the video, if you scroll down a little, you'll see the description field. It's a set of text that describes the video. And if there's a lot, it won't show you the whole thing. But you can see the whole thing if you go to the bottom right and click More. Now, if you go way down below the table of contents, these would be the files that you would download. You just click on any of the links, and you should get the option to download the file in whichever folder you choose. Then you can just save it. And now let's import them into our QuickBooks Online account. But before we do that, let's take a quick look inside to see what they look like. You see, normally we would have many fields of data for each vendor, and each vendor we import would import with all the other fields of data, like address and telephone and email and so on. But in our example, we really only need to import 2 data fields for each vendor. So we will skip all the extra vendor data that would normally be in a real situation. So if we compare the sample file that QuickBooks Online allows us to download to the file we're actually going to import, we could see the sample file is more like a real situation where all the data for any one particular vendor would import. But because we're just learning, and because this is just an example, I only put 4 vendors on the list, and we're only going to input 2 out of the many fields of data for each vendor. And that will save us some time. And of course, in a real situation, you could go back and add all the data to the vendors if you needed to. Now, we know that we click the Expense tab in the left panel in order to get to the vendors. And if this is your very first time coming to the vendor window, because we assume that you opened a brand new QuickBooks Online account to follow step by step, in that case, you would click Import Vendors and you would go right to the import screen. But if you've already been to this window before, you would have to click up here in the top right, New Vendor, and Import Vendors. Either one would get you to the import screen. So let's take a look. We click Expense, and then of course Vendors. And when we do that, because this is my first time coming here in this account, this is what it looks like. But either way, you'll have an opportunity to click Import Vendors. And now here we are in the Import Vendor window. This would be the place to click to download the sample file that I just showed you and just show you what was inside. But instead, we're going to click Browse, and we're going to go to the folder that you had downloaded the vendor lists to import. Here it is, and all you have to do after browsing is double click, and notice the name of the file is right here. Once you have the correct file, you go to the bottom right and click Next. Now, again, we only have the name field, which is the minimum amount of data you would need to import. But you could import all those other fields of data along with the vendor name, like I showed you a moment ago in the sample file. So just leave it like this and click Next. And we're going to, then QuickBooks Online shows you a list of vendors that are going to import. And it gives you the name of every one. So if you did not want to import any particular vendor, then you would remove the check mark. But we're going to leave the check marks there and import all 4 of these vendors. Then we click Import, and you can see these 4 vendors are on the vendor list. And now that they're here, you can do whatever you want. You can select one, and you can make it inactive, or you can click here, and you can create an expense, or you could even double click on the name, and then you can edit the other details. So for example, if you wanted to edit anything else, you would click Edit, and you would have the ability to add all those other fields of data that we skipped over. And of course, customers get imported in the exact same way. Just like you would have to click Expenses to get to the Vendors tab for the vendor section, you would have to click Sales and Customers to get to the customer list. And again, if it's the first time here, you would click Import Customers. Notice it looks exactly the same as the Import Vendors window. You could download a sample file, but we already discussed that. So we will just click Browse, and we will find the file called Customers to import. Double click, and again, once the file name is here, we then click Next. Notice we only have the customer name because this is an example in a course. But in a real situation, we would have other fields of data that we would match to make sure they go into the right place. Then, of course, we would click Next, and we agree that we're importing these 3 specific customers. Again, if there were any customers we did not want to import, we would remove the check mark, but we will leave it because we want all 3 in this example. Then we click Import. And now you can see all 3 customers have been added to the customer list, and we can double click on their name and then click Edit if we want to add or change any of the other fields of customer data. And now we will input the accounts that we need into the chart of accounts. Now we do this from the chart of accounts window, and the file format is the same as the other 2 lists that we just finished inputting. And in the list, we need only these 3 pieces of data. So if you were to double click and open up the file Accounts to Import, you would see that the first row has the titles, and then there would be the 3 pieces of data for each account: the name, the type, and the detail type. And as always, all three columns are formatted in General. So within your QuickBooks Online account, you could click the cogwheel and go all the way to the left and click Chart of Accounts, or you could go to the left panel and click Transactions and go across and down to Chart of Accounts. The result will be the same. Now here we are in the Chart of Accounts window, and you can see that there are many other accounts in the Chart of Accounts that QuickBooks Online already put there for you. We will not be using these, we will be importing our own. So we click in the top right and click New, but we click the pull down arrow next to the word New and we click Import. Now here's where we search for the file that we're going to import. We click, oh by the way, you could download a sample and see that the sample chart of accounts is formatted exactly in the same way as the file that we are about to upload. So we click Browse and we look around for the file that says Accounts to Import. And we double click, and again we make sure the name is correct right here in the field, and then in the bottom right we click Next. Now here we're mapping the data like we discussed earlier, and in the prior lists we only needed to confirm one field of data, the name. But when it comes to importing the chart of accounts, you have to make sure that you map correctly all three areas of data: the detail type, the account name, and the type. Make sure that those are matched to the correct column heading. Then in the bottom right we click Next. Now here we're confirming every account on the list that we're going to import. And again, if there were any account that we did not want to import, you could just click the green arrow and remove it if you didn't want to. But we want to import all of these at once, and it seems like the mapped data came over correctly to all three areas of data for each account. So all we have to do is click Import. Now we come to the chart of accounts, and by the way, the chart of accounts can be sorted by name or type just by clicking on the column heading. So you can see the ones that are in capital letters are the ones that just recently imported, and the ones whose names are in lowercase are the ones that QuickBooks Online had in the chart of accounts before we imported. Look, you can click the column heading of account type and all of the bank type of accounts will come up to the top. And that's the most convenient way to view it. And I'm going to close with one very helpful trick. It might be helpful for you to not see the other accounts that QuickBooks Online created mixed in with the accounts that you imported. So you can come up to the top, and in this pull down you can view only the accounts created by you. Click on it, and then what will show are only the, or at least for the most part, only the accounts that were imported.
Chapter 5. Importing the setup transactions.
So now we're going to see how the transactions that were recorded by the bank actually get into your QuickBooks Online account. Remember, you would not want the transactions that the bank recorded to go directly into your QuickBooks Online and change the numbers and change the reports unless you had a chance to review each transaction to verify that the transaction is legitimate. Now, there are two separate ways that the transaction data can come from the bank into your review list. You can either download or import, and I'm going to explain the difference right now. Downloading a transaction set means that you're looking at the review list and you click and sign into your bank from the review list window, And once you do that, all the transactions that the bank recorded go directly from the bank into your review list. But doing it that way doesn't really give you as much control as importing transactions. When you import transactions, you actually take a file that's sitting on your computer, and that file has all of the bank transactions recorded by the bank, and then you take that file and you upload it and import it into your QuickBooks Online review list. And you may well ask, where does that file come from? That file first has to come from the bank. And the way you would get that file is you would log into your bank account online with your browser the way you normally would, separate from QuickBooks Online, and somewhere inside your bank online account would be your bank activity, and almost every financial institution has a place where you can click, where you can set a date range of the transactions that you want to download into a specific file. And once you follow the steps that your bank gives you to download all the transactions into one specific file onto your computer, then you can import that file from your computer into the QuickBooks Online review list. And I'm going to show you both ways right now. So the first method, which is the one that gives you more control over importing into the review list, is when you download a file from the bank and then upload that file from the bank into the QuickBooks Online review list. Now, when you go to your bank and you download the file, the two most common file formats that have all of the bank transactions listed there that you can put into your QuickBooks Online review list, the two common formats are .csv and .qbo. And you may well ask, what's the difference? Well, today, most financial institutions give you the ability to choose either of those formats. And the real difference is, if you're importing a .csv file, you will have the ability to open up the file and actually change the data yourself by typing over or typing in to the little fields of data, saving it, and then you can upload it. That's the good news. The bad news about uploading a CSV file into your QuickBooks Online review list is that you have to map the data fields so QuickBooks Online knows which column in the Excel file equals which field of data in your transactions. But if you download a QBO file, all you have to do is click and import the same way that it was easy to click and import with the lists. All you have to do is click on it and it goes right into the review list. But the bad thing about the .qbo file is that you can't open it up yourself and change the data before you import it into the QuickBooks Online review list. So let's take a look at an example of each. So if you're watching this video in a browser, right below the video, if you scroll down a little, you'll see the description field. It's a set of text that describes the video. And if there's a lot, it won't show you the whole thing. But you can see the whole thing if you go to the bottom right and click More. Now, if you go way down below the table of contents, these would be the files that you would download. You just click on any of the links, and you should get the option to download the file in whichever folder you choose. Then you can just save it. Now, in the list of accounts that we previously imported, there were 3 separate bank accounts for you to experience 3 separate ways to import transactions. And the names of the accounts will tell you which account to import which file. Bank account number 1 is named CSV Import. So we know that file will be imported into that bank account. Bank account number 2 is named QBO file import. So clearly we're going to import the QBO file into that account. And our last example will be connecting directly to the bank, and this will be the bank account that imports those transactions. This way, in this video chapter, you can see all 3 options of importing the transactions into the review list. So the first one we're going to import is the CSV file, the one that looks like this icon and has a CSV extension. And it's very simple. Here we are after clicking Transactions, Bank Transactions. If it's your first time coming to this center and you did not import anything, this is what it should look like. And of course, if we were doing option number 3, we would connect the account directly. But in the first example, we're going to click Upload Transactions. That means we have to search in our computer for the folder for the file we want to import. So we can click in this section, and I have it set on the folder that I want, but you might have to navigate to the folder where you downloaded the file. And here is the CSV file that we're going to import. So we double click. Now it clearly knows which file we're importing, so we click Continue. Now we have to tell QuickBooks Online which of our bank type of accounts will have this file imported into it. So we click the pull down arrow and we choose First Bank Account CSV Import. We click on it and QuickBooks Online will know which account the transactions will go into. Then we click Continue, and now you have to ask yourself, what is this asking us? Well, it's very simple. When you import a CSV file, you have to take a moment to map the Excel columns to the data fields in QuickBooks Online. And it's very simple, and most of the time QuickBooks Online can recognize it and do it for you. In our file, we only have 3 different column headings, and we only have 3 different fields of data that QuickBooks Online assumed were the 3 columns. So if we come back to QuickBooks Online, you can see that they already chose the correct columns to map because the names were written clearly, and I suggest you make the names the same as the names here. But if it made a mistake, you could always click the pull down and choose another column if it were wrong. But in this case, it's fine. So the only thing that you will formally have to tell QuickBooks Online, usually, because it usually gets the mapping right, is what date format your file has. And I suggest the top one here, and once you choose the right date format, QuickBooks Online will allow you to click Continue. Now, notice it gives you the list of every transaction in the file that it is able to import. And of course, if you only wanted to import some of them, you would simply click the check mark on only the ones you want to import. But in our case, we want to import all of them, so you can click the top box, which selects all of the transactions in the file, meaning they will all import to the review list. And then you can scroll all the way down and click Continue. Now, it's confirming that you want to import 122 transactions. We agree and we click Yes. And if you wait a moment, you will see for the first time transactions listed in the review list. The import is complete without a problem. Click Done. And now when we come back, we see there's one bank account that has information and transactions imported. Now, of course, in the next video, we will navigate the review list, and you will understand better what you're looking at when you scroll down and see the list of the transactions in the review list. And I promise you, you'll understand everything you're looking at in the next video chapter. But in this video chapter, we're going to explore the 2 additional ways to import transactions. So now let's try our second example where we will import the .qbo file that we downloaded. And you will find this one is much easier to import. You don't have to stop and map any column headings or make any choices at all. This one goes in seamlessly and immediately. So how do we do that? Well, if you're already in the Bank Feed Center, you can come up here where it says Link Account, click the pull down arrow, and click Upload from File. And we click here, and again we go to the same window where we choose which file we're going to upload. And we click here, and again you would normally navigate to the specific folder where you kept this file, the downloaded transactions. That's the .qbo file that we're going to import. So you can double click or click open and confirm that QuickBooks Online has chosen the correct file. Then click Continue. Now simply choose which particular bank account this file is going to be imported into. And when we click the pull down arrow, we can choose Second Bank Account QBO File Import. That's the name of the bank account that this file is being imported into. So we click on it and we click Continue. We're done. That's it. You did not have to map any column headings or choose any date format. We're done. So you click Done, and now when you come back to the Bank Feed Center, you see that there are 2 bank accounts you can choose from. If you click here and the first one is highlighted, you're looking at the transactions in the first one. But if you click here and this one is highlighted, now you're looking at the transactions in the second one. And you can see these are different transactions and the computer reacted differently to them. So now we'll see what it looks like when you actually import the data by downloading it directly from the bank. This means you can log in right from the review list window and tell QuickBooks Online which transactions you want to pull from your bank and go automatically on the review list. Now, in this example, I'm not going to bring my bank's data directly into the account that we are already using. I'm going to choose a different bank account, and this part of the lesson is only watch. It's not follow along step by step. You might not even have the same bank that I have, and even if you do, you're not going to be importing the same transactions because you don't have the same bank account with the same transactions. Now, clearly this way is the most convenient way to do it. That's because after the first time you connect, you can just click Update and you will see only the transactions that were recorded after the last time you imported will come into the review list. And this is the way most people do it, but you don't have to do it this way if you want to have more control over the date range of what imports. Now keep in mind that this part that you're about to see is not follow along step by step. Because obviously if you connect to your own bank, what you will see will always be a little different. But the idea will be the same, so it's worth demonstrating. So just to demonstrate, we will not use this account, the account that I'm going to import the transactions into this third example will not affect any of the numbers in the course. It's just for you to watch to get the idea. So the way to do it that way would be to click Link Account. Then you get a list of financial institutions that make this service available. And if you click Show More and you scroll all the way down and you don't see your bank or financial institution on the list, well, I have some bad news. It means your bank or your credit card company simply does not make this service available through QuickBooks Online. You could always ask them if you're able to download a file that's QBO or CSV if your financial institution is not on the list, and then you can import the previous ways. But in my case, I use Chase. I always loved them. I thought they were great. I still think they're great. It's my opinion. So it's a typical bank, and we would click Continue to sign in. Now it brings me over to Chase, and I'm actually going to put in my login information. And now that I've logged in, it's just confirming what the process is, and you will see something different if you use a different bank from Chase. I click Next, and it's just again confirming, and you could open up each thing and read all you want, but let's click Next. Now, this part confuses me because I don't know why they think I'm sharing data already. Again, you're going to get a bunch of bizarre things depending on which financial institution you use, but just follow the prompts until you get to this point, link my accounts, and at some point it's going to ask you the proper questions. Now, first it's asking which particular account within Chase has the transactions that I want to bring into QuickBooks Online. And I'll choose my business checking. Then it's asking which account inside QuickBooks Online should this account go into. And of course, in this example, it's the third bank account, Connect Directly. See how easy? Then I just click Connect, and all I have to do is wait, and all of the transactions going back to the date that I choose will come from that particular Chase bank account into that particular bank type of account in the chart of accounts in QuickBooks Online. See, bringing it in very nicely. Okay, see where the money goes, blah, 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 blah. Remind me later. And now when we come back to the QuickBooks Online bank feeds review list, we're actually at the dashboard, transactions, bank transactions, what do you notice? Now there's a third bank account. And if you select that third bank account, these are the transactions that have come in from that third bank account. Again, choose the prior one, you get the prior transactions. Choose the current one, you get the current transactions. And here they are. And those are the three different ways that you can import into the QuickBooks Online review list.
Chapter 6. Navigating the review list.
And now that we know the different ways to put the bank's data into the review list, let's take a moment to look around the review list so we know what we're looking at. Of course, down here are all the transactions that were imported or downloaded from the bank. But if you go to the top, you will notice the three important sections separated by these three tabs. And this is what you will use to have total control over the import process when you're managing your data. First, there's the section of For Review. And that's the section you're looking here. You're looking at every transaction that's waiting for you to make sure that this is a legitimate transaction before you save it into your QuickBooks Online records and actually have it affect your reports and numbers. This middle section, called Categorized, is for all the transactions that you already imported into your QuickBooks Online records that actually changed the numbers and reports. So once you approve a transaction, it will disappear from the section of For Review, and it will be included in the middle section in QuickBooks already. And this last tab here is for any transaction that you rejected because you know this is not a valid transaction and you downloaded from the bank a transaction that you do not want to record into your QuickBooks Online records. So they all start out in the section of For Review, and you have a choice of moving them into the QuickBooks section or the Excluded section. Once you move something into the QuickBooks section, there will be two pieces of evidence that shows that this transaction is in QuickBooks. First, it shows up in the middle section in the list when you click the middle tab. But you can also verify that it has been recorded in your QuickBooks Online records the old-fashioned way. You can go and open your reports and see that the transaction has been recorded. And if you have a transaction that you rejected because it downloaded from the bank but it is not valid, it will be in the Excluded section. Now, when it comes to the middle section in QuickBooks, you cannot delete it from that list. If you want to remove it from QuickBooks, you have to remove it the way that you learned. You have to open the reports that the transaction is listed on, open up the transaction, and delete it. But if you rejected a transaction and you put it in the Excluded section, it will stay there forever until you physically delete it from the Excluded section. And QuickBooks Online allows you to delete things that have been put in the Excluded section. This way, if you mess things up, you can exclude everything, delete everything, and then re-import and start fresh. Hopefully, we will not need to do that. You see, any transaction listed under the section of For Review needs to be approved and then categorized before it can be recorded into your QuickBooks Online records. Once they're approved, then they can be recorded. Now, categorized means that after you approve and you agree the transaction is legitimate, you must choose an account category that the transaction gets recorded into. For example, if the transaction is money coming out of the account, you have to choose which expense type of account that transaction will be recorded into. But if it's a transaction where money is coming into the account, you have to decide what income type of account gets recorded with that transaction. You have to tell QuickBooks Online, is this money coming in because we did an editing service and it goes into editing income? Or is this money coming into the account because we did a video service and therefore you would instead choose video income as the income account? Now, once you categorize the transaction and decided to enter it, it will disappear from the section of For Review and reappear under the middle tab, Categorized. But if you reject a transaction completely because you see that something that was downloaded from the bank was not a legitimate transaction, then you will exclude it and it will disappear from the section of For Review and reappear under the section of Excluded. That means that all the transactions will ultimately go into either of these two tabs, and when you finish, the section of For Review should be completely empty. Now, this process is made even easier by your ability to sort the entire set of transactions by each of the column headings. And you'll notice something interesting when you sort by the column headings. Let's first sort by the column of Amount and see what happens. So first, make sure that you choose the first bank account by clicking this box so that we're all looking at the same transactions. Now all you have to do is click on the name of the column heading and it will sort all transactions in the order of that particular column. Notice when I clicked amount, the numbers went from highest to lowest, and they will eventually get to the negative numbers for the money coming out. But if you click the column heading again, you notice the arrow goes upside down and you will now see the lowest to highest, which means the largest negative number to the lowest negative number means it's going from lowest to highest like it would on a number line. But the interesting thing happens when you actually sort by the date column. Watch. If you scroll down now, you don't see anything unusual and you do not see the transactions broken up into groups. But if I click the date heading, notice not only is it by date, but QuickBooks Online will break up the transactions by month. Notice here's the heading of January of 26, and here's all the transactions in January. Now there's a little space and it says February, and here are all of the February transactions and March transactions and so on. This makes it a lot easier to control which ones you want to approve or at least double check on and verify. Let's even go further and sort it by bank detail and see what happens. You see, the bank detail is the most important column in all of the review list. Look what happens if I click bank detail. Notice all of Alan's transactions are grouped together the way the months were grouped together. Now all the ATM withdrawal transactions, meaning all of the transactions that have a similar bank text or bank description will be grouped together the same way that the months were grouped together when you sorted them by date. See? They're all in groups with a little space in between them. Now these groups help you review everything and they help you enter things more quickly, which we're going to see in the next video chapter. You see, groups are categories and subcategories that the review list organizes the transactions into. For date, they'll organize your transactions by month. But if you group by bank text, then the transactions will be grouped by similar text inside the text field. And this makes approving and categorizing much easier and much faster. In fact, if you really want control, what you can do is you can actually click an arrow, the down arrow next to the name of the group, and collapse the group, collapse the group, collapse the group. Now they're all squashed together and condensed, and you can see how many groups there are. And if you want, you can click to open up only one group if you want to record things from just that group, or double check and scrutinize before you approve anything in any particular group. So remembering these tips will make everything else we do very, very easy.
Chapter 7. Entering and excluding transactions.
And now we're finally going to approve and add transactions from the review list into your QuickBooks Online records. So when you choose to approve something, you have to verify two things. First, you want to make sure that the transaction is legitimate. But after you agree that the transaction should be added to your QuickBooks Online records, only you can choose the correct account category, meaning the expense classification if it's a payment, or the income category if it's a deposit. Or maybe it's a transfer between one bank account to another. But only you know what the transaction is. The bank cannot know. And that's why after you approve it and agree it's legitimate, you must tell QuickBooks Online which account category classification this transaction will have when it gets recorded from the review list into QuickBooks Online. So, of course, we will start by looking at the transactions under the For Review tab. And again, when we finish, all of the transactions will be moved to either here or here. If they're categorized and entered, they'll move to the Categorize tab, but if they are not legitimate, they will instead be moved to the Excluded tab. Now, this section, For Review, should be completely empty when we finish our work reviewing all the transactions and categorizing them. But why do you think the middle section that shows everything that's actually entered into QuickBooks is called Categorized? Well, that's because after you determine that it's a legitimate transaction, you, not the computer, must decide what income or expense type of account would go with that deposit or that payment. For example, if it's a transaction where money is going out of the account, you have to tell QuickBooks Online, is this for electricity or is this for telephone? Then once you decide that, you can record it from the review list into the QuickBooks Online records. Same thing with deposits and money coming in. Did you earn this money for doing a video service or an editing service? Once you tell QuickBooks Online which income account the deposit goes with, then you can record it from the review list into QuickBooks Online. Now you may notice that on the right side there are words written in blue. These words written in blue are simply suggestions by the artificial intelligence that QuickBooks Online uses in order to help you categorize the transactions. You see, what QuickBooks Online will do is it will look at the bank text and then look at the corresponding account name for the names of your accounts in your chart of accounts that the artificial intelligence in QuickBooks Online thinks is the most likely match for the category of that transaction. You see, it would make sense that if the words in the bank detail were ATM withdrawal, that you were withdrawing that to put into your petty cash account. And the artificial intelligence knows that. So it is suggesting to you that anything in the bank detail that says ATM withdrawal should be recorded into the petty cash account. Now, of course, you can choose the account yourself if you don't agree with whatever the suggestion is. Remember, it's only a suggestion. So let's try the first one. Let's do our first example of entering a transaction by agreeing with the suggestion. And if you sorted, by the way, if you sorted your bank register for the first bank account, in the column of date, the January 1 $500 for Alan Arby would be first. So here I am in the review list here. Make sure that you chose the first bank account and that you sorted it by date with the arrow pointing up, which means the earliest to latest. That means the first one will be the $500 for Alan Arby. Now, my computer and my QuickBooks Online account suggested video income. Yours might suggest something different because I was playing around with my account in order to prepare for the video. But it doesn't matter if your suggestion is the same as mine because you have the ability to accept or reject the suggested account. So let's try an example. Let's just click Confirm together for the very first one for whichever suggestion the computer gave. So if in fact the first suggestion is video income like mine, and you agreed or, whatever it is, As soon as you confirm it, what will be the result in the trial balance if this is a blank, brand new QuickBooks Online account and we are recording our first transaction from the review list into QuickBooks Online? Well, if we accept a $500 deposit into the QuickBooks Online records, then the first bank account will show up for the first time in the trial balance as $500. And in my particular case, they suggested video income. That means video income will also show up for the first time as $500. And if you don't have video income, it'll be whatever account they suggested will show up for the first time as $500. So let's take a look and see what happens. Okay, here we are right here. Now all we're doing is we're not adding any data in our first example. We're not changing the transaction in any way. So for the January one, for the very first one, just click Confirm. And what does it tell you? Now notice, instead of 122 needing to be reviewed, you have 121 that need to be reviewed because one has already been categorized. And you can confirm that by clicking the Categorize tab, and now you see the one that you just confirmed is here in the Categorized section. And you can also confirm that it has been entered into QuickBooks Online by clicking Reports, Custom Reports, and go down to the trial balance. And notice for the very first time, first bank account with CSV import shows up as $500, and whatever income account you chose or whatever income account the computer chose that you confirmed should also show up in the credit column as $500. Now, even if your trial balance agrees with mine, there's still a problem with what we just did. You see, we recorded that transaction without the name of the customer that gave us the money, or if it were an expense and you just click Confirm, it would record it without the vendor whom you paid. You need to put the customer or vendor, and that information is not there. Watch, I'm going to show you. If I double click on the first bank account to see the transaction listed here, you will see that there is no name. Okay, this is not technically the name. This is the description. And it will copy over the description from the bank text, but the name is not here. Watch, it will not show up. This transaction will not show up on any of the customer specific reports. If I open the transaction list by customer, you can see this report is blank. Okay, normally it would say Vaughn DeVideo. It's blank. Why is it blank? It's blank because we did not put a customer, so it will not show up on the transaction list by customer. That's a problem. So what do we need to do? Let's undo it, and then, okay, let's undo it, which is now a separate conversation. So we go back to the review list by clicking Transactions, Bank Transactions, and let's go to the Categorize tab, and let's undo this one. Now, if there were many, you could select many and undo them, and you could click it from here. Or you can go on the same row and just click for that one on that row. Click Undo. Now, notice there are now again 122 for review and nothing in the Categorize tab. But watch, when we go back to the trial balance now is again completely empty. It's down to 0 with no accounts because we undid that transaction. Now, you have to be super careful with undo. And I just proved why you have to be super careful. It will remove all the transactions from the reports if they were in fact recorded from the review list. So if someone gets into the review list and they click undo on a bunch of transactions, it will totally mess up your reports. So you must be careful with the undo feature. Now, before we re-record that transaction properly, we have to put Alan's name in the name field, because QuickBooks Online doesn't know what text in the bank detail is the name of the person. And when it gives you suggestions, it does not suggest a customer name. It will only suggest an account from the chart of accounts. So in order to do that, because it cannot know the name from the bank text, see, it's just the bank text, it's not the name. So in order to do that, in order to enter a name, and in order to put the account category, if we don't agree with the suggestion, we have to do something called open up the transaction before we can add the fields of data that we need. So what does that mean, open up a transaction? To open up a transaction means to click anywhere in the row, and then you will get access to the additional fields of data. So we come back to the review list and we put the mouse over the row of the transaction that we need to open up in order to fix, and all we have to do is click once. And now you can see for this January 1 Allen transaction, you can see all the other fields of data and all the other things we can do to each transaction from the review list. And of course, we could add a product or service, we could add a tag, we could even change the text of the memo if we wanted. Anything. We could record it as a transfer. There's a whole bunch of things that we can actually do, and I will be showing all of these plus more in later parts of the course. But for our section here, we will focus on the two most common fields for now. For now, we're going to put what we would normally put in a real situation. We will simply choose the name of the customer or vendor, and of course, we will choose which particular account category it goes in if we don't agree with the suggestion. So watch how we would do it. For the account category, click the pull down. Here is your whole chart of accounts, and you can choose any other income account you want for any deposit that came from a customer. But we'll leave it as video income. But if you don't have video income, if that were not your computer suggestion, make it video income now. And the person who paid you, click the pull down arrow. We know from the bank text that the name field should have Alan Arby. Now when we click confirm, you will see that it has been removed from the for review section. And when we go to categorized, you can see the category is video income, but now it also says Alan Arby in the from to section. And when we go to the reports and we look at the trial balance, of course the trial balance looked the way it looked a moment ago, but when we double click and open up the transaction and see the transaction is listed, now it has a name, Alan Arby. In fact, now the transaction will actually be listed in the customer specific reports because it actually has a customer associated with it. Remember, a moment ago, this report was blank because we did not put a name. So let's do the second example. Betty's deposit goes with editing income. And after we associate Betty with editing income, we'll look again at the artificial intelligence suggestion and see what happens. So we go back to the review list by clicking Transactions, Bank Transactions. Now, the second one on the list is for Betty, and it did not suggest one of the accounts that I put. It doesn't know that Betty Boop goes with editing income. So we click to open it up, and we choose the name Betty Boop, and we choose the account category as editing income. And for now, we're only changing these two, and 90% of your actual experience, you'll only have to change these two. But watch the incredible thing that happens once you change something and click confirm. Okay? Not only is it already recorded, see, look, we click categorized. Now Alan's and Betty's is in the categorized list, and it has a name. But before we check the reports, oh, by the way, there's one less in the for review section. We click here. But notice something. If we go down, we now notice all of the other transactions that have Betty Boop in the bank text now have Betty Boop as a suggested name, and all those that have Betty Boop in the bank text have editing income. A moment ago, it had a different account. So the artificial intelligence is learning, and it gives you a suggestion based on what you previously did. Okay? So we can now check the reports, and we look at the custom reports, and we look at the trial balance, and you can see the balance in the account is $1,200, editing income $700 from Betty, video income $500 from Alan, and when we double click the bank, we can see here are the transactions recorded into our QuickBooks Online records with the name and with the proper account category. So now let's try excluding a transaction. Let's exclude the third transaction on the list with Candy Charles. Let's go back and click Transactions, Bank Transactions. Make sure the first account is chosen. Now the third one down became the first one down. It's Candy Charles. And let's take a look at what happens when we exclude this transaction. We click the check mark in the box next to it. Then we go to the top right and click Exclude. Now notice there's only 119 for review because 3 have been removed. 2 of them are here under Categorized, but 1 of them is here under Exclude. And you can exclude it, and it will stay here until you delete it and remove it permanently. Now, let's undo what was excluded before we talk about deleting. We click Undo. Now, notice there are 120 for review, and it's back on the review list. But what is special about the transactions that are excluded? Please note, the Exclude tab is the only place that you can permanently delete an item from the review list. Okay? Don't worry. If you wrongfully excluded and then wrongfully deleted a transaction that really needed to be entered, don't worry. You can just enter it the normal way from the cogwheel, like you learned in your prior courses, and not even enter it from the review list itself. It's probably very rare that you're going to both accidentally exclude it and accidentally delete it, and then find out later that you needed to record it. But if so, just go and record it the normal way. And finally, let's do one of the best things that the new review list makes available. Let's batch enter a bunch of transactions. And in order to do that, you need to sort by the bank text field. So we're in the review list here. And again, bank detail, if we click that column heading, every transaction will be grouped and sorted by the similarities in the bank text field. Notice all of Alan's are together, all of the ATM withdrawals are together, all of Betty's are together, and so on. Now it starts at the beginning of the English alphabet with A if the arrow is pointing up. Click and make the arrow point down, it'll start with the end of the alphabet for those that have the bank text for the items that start with V. But let's click back bank text and leave it in this order. And if you wanted to record everything within a group, all you would have to do is click the check mark at the top of that group, and only that group would be selected. And then we could accept it, exclude it, or we could batch edit it and choose a person and a category for every one of these transactions all at once. And that would save us so much time. And then they could all be entered all at once. So which one are we doing? Well, let's close this out. So for our actual example, we will record all of the transactions that have the word Verizon in the bank text into telephone expense. And of course, we will also put the vendor name as Verizon. Now, of course, we have to go back to the review list and make sure that you chose the first bank account and that things are sorted by the bank detail with the arrow facing up, earliest to latest. And in order to get the Verizon transactions, you have to scroll all the way down and click on the third, meaning the very last page that's in the review list. And notice on the last page at the bottom, you have 12 Verizon transactions. 12 transactions where Verizon is in the bank text. We click the name to select the group. Then we click Edit to batch edit the group. We know that this is an expense. We're not transferring from one account to the next. And we know that the vendor we're dealing with is Verizon because that's what it says in the bank detail. And you have to make sure that you choose telephone expense. Telephone expense. So Verizon telephone expense. And now that we have the three pieces of data for all of the transactions in the group, all we have to do is click Apply and Confirm. And you will see they disappeared from the third page. See, only UPS is here. Only 108 for review. Click Categorized. And they're all in the Categorized section. And if we click Reports, Custom Reports, Trial Balance, you can see that telephone expense has a total of $3,400 for all of the Verizon transactions. You could also click Reports and click the vendor reports like Transaction List by Vendor, and you can see that it does show up in the vendor specific reports because it has a name. And that would be the way to record from the review list to the QuickBooks Online records.
Chapter 8. Matching transactions to prevent duplicates.
So now we will talk about this great feature regarding matching transactions. You see, matching transactions is the feature that guarantees that a transaction is not entered twice. Because remember, there's always the potential that you recorded the transaction yourself, and that very same transaction might also download with the rest of the transactions from the bank and be accidentally duplicated in your QuickBooks Online records. Now, of course, the suggested matches are based on money amount. In other words, QuickBooks Online found a transaction that was already recorded in your QuickBooks Online records with the same money amount as the transaction that was recently downloaded into the review list. So QuickBooks Online knows that possibly, potentially, this is the same transaction. That's why it suggests to you that this is a match. But ultimately, when you come to this window, you have to know if this is a transaction that you already recorded or if, in fact, it is a separate transaction. If it's a separate transaction, you can just click right here and remove the check mark. But if it's the wrong transaction, For example, there's several transactions with the same money amount. It's up to you to uncheck the wrong one and recheck the correct one so QuickBooks Online knows which transaction not to put into your QuickBooks Online records because it's already there. And if you click something is matched, it has the same result as excluding it. It simply makes sure that it does not go into your QuickBooks Online records because it's there already. So sometimes we have to record some transactions ourselves. But if we want to use the benefit of the bank feeds and review list feature, it will sometimes also be downloaded from the bank. And you need to make sure it does not get recorded twice into your QuickBooks Online records. So how does matching transactions prevent duplicates? Well, as soon as you download transactions from the review list, it will automatically look for transactions in the same money amount within the same account. And if it finds transactions of the same money amount within a certain date range, it will suggest that these two transactions are a match. And remember, it's just a suggestion because the computer cannot know the circumstance behind the transaction, but you must. So it will suggest that it's a match by showing you the little green box that says one match found with the little information about the fact that it's a deposit for $1,000. Now, what you will have to do is click anywhere in the row of that transaction to open up the transaction the way we learned in a prior chapter. And notice it usually uses artificial intelligence to judge a particular date range for you to be suggested that this is some kind of match and that more than just the money amount, it also falls between a certain time range. Now, of course, if you agree, you leave the little green button where it says match and you click match in the bottom right here. But if it's not a match at all and it's a mistake because the computer doesn't know the circumstance of the transaction, you could instead click Categorize and treat it the way you treat all the other downloaded transactions if it's not a match. But if it is a match, you leave the green button here and you click the bottom right green button there. And then the question is, what happens when you match a transaction? When you match a transaction, you are telling QuickBooks Online not to record this because it's already there. That's the point. And you are telling QuickBooks Online it does not need to be on the review list at all because you already entered it. So therefore, if you click match, it will disappear from the review list and not enter anything additional into the QuickBooks Online records. So when you confirm that a particular transaction is a match, it will not be put in the excluded section, even though it will have no effect on your QuickBooks Online records. What will happen is one will be decreased in the For Review section, and it will simply move from the For Review section to the Categorize section without being recorded into QuickBooks Online. And when you're in the Categorize section, this is what it will look like when it's matched already to a particular transaction that has already been recorded. It will be in Categorized, it will not be in Excluded, but the whole point of having it show the word match to means it downloaded, but it was already there and you confirmed that it matched. So let's try one ourselves. Please record a January 6, 2026 $1,000 deposit from Candy Charles for service income, and then we will see what it looks like when we match it. So we will come to the top left, New, Bank Deposit, and we're going to put January 6 of 2026, and we make sure that it's the first bank account, the one we're working for, that we received from Candy, and we said it was what kind of income? We said it was service income, the account that came with service income, this one, and the amount is $1,000. Okay, so we're recording this ourselves because sometimes we have to. Now, when we click Save and Close, and you come back to the review list, okay, you might have to click Refresh. In fact, that's a rule. You might even have to, in addition to refreshing your browser, you might have to log out and log in again. And let's see if refresh worked. Okay. So I'm lucky that after I refreshed it, it updated and found the potential match. Now, maybe we agree, maybe we don't. But we have to open up the transaction here by clicking anywhere in the row, and you can see that between a reasonable date range within the same bank account, it was the same money amount. Now, again, if we click match, it means we're basically just erasing it from the review list because we know it's already entered. So you can see that it has been removed from the For Review section of the review list because you told QuickBooks Online, don't do anything, this is already recorded. Now look, as promised, it is also not in the Excluded tab because it hasn't really been excluded. But there is history of what did happen if you click Categorized. If you click Categorized, then any transaction that was previously matched will show up here, and see, here it is, the January 5th was matched to the January 6th one that downloaded, and you can see matched to deposit. So this one was categorized before it was downloaded because we matched, and we can open this up and we can see right here it was matched. So that is the effect of matching something so that you don't duplicate anything. So then your question might be, what if there are more than one potential match within the account? So let's try another one and see what happens. If we record February 1, 2026, $400 expense payment to Con Edison for electricity expense, you will notice that that falls between the first $400 in electric expense for Con Edison, which is dated the 13th, and the other $400 of electric expense to Con Edison, which is dated February 22nd. So it should be interesting to see which one gets the suggested match. So this is the one that we will record, and it should take us a second. New, expense, and the date we want is February 1 of 2026. So we go forward here to February 1 of 2026 for Con Edison from the first bank account, the one we're working from. Again, this is electric expense, and the amount is $400. Okay, now when we click Save and Close, now this is the same one transaction that we recorded, and the review list is suggesting either of these two because we only recorded one for $400, and there are two of them for $400 within that particular date range. If we agree that particular $400 expense, the one that we recorded before downloading the review list, if we agree that it's this one, we would match it to this one, and this match suggestion would disappear. and vice versa. If we agreed it was this one and we matched it to this one, then that suggestion would disappear. So if we click here and open it up, it's telling us the date range. But if we click, and again, there are no other transactions to match it to, but by clicking Find Other Matches, we'll see the window is confirming that if we agree the only $400 one that we entered, if we agree it's this one, it'll match it to this one. Same thing if we open up the other one. If we open up this one and then click Find Other Matches, we're not really finding other matches. It's just confirming that if we agree with that one, it'll match it instead to the February 22nd one, and that's how it works. But remember, in this particular instance, we only recorded one transaction for $400, and it gave us two different suggestions. What if there were two transactions that we entered for $400? That means there would be two potential matches. So to really get this, let's enter one more potential match really quickly, and then we'll open up the suggested match and see what happens. So again, we'll click New, Expense, February 4th of 2026, again Con Edison, again from the first bank account, again electricity expense, and again $400. Save and close. Now when we go back to the review list for the section of Con Edison, it still says one match found because it doesn't know which one goes with this and which one goes with this. But we know there are two of them that we did record ourselves that could potentially match. When we open up either one of them, this one is suggesting that one of them matches to the fourth. But now watch, if we have more than one that we entered with the same amount, we can click Find Other Matches. Now, for the January 13th transaction that downloaded, there are now two potential matches that we could assign to this particular transaction. So you would have to know from your own business experience within your business which one gets matched with which. But look, if you go to the other one, the one with the later date, if we click to open it and click Find, you see, it's giving us a choice of which one. It's suggesting one of them, but it's listing all the ones that we entered that we could potentially match. And if we click Find Other Matches, it's just going to show us the same window. It's going to ask which of these two is going to be assigned to the one that's downloaded as February 22nd, 2026. So let's go ahead and match the earlier one with the earlier one and the later one with the later one. When we click here, okay, Find Other Matches, which one do we want to match to the earlier one? This one. Click Match. Now that one is matched off and you don't have to worry about duplicating. Now there are still two that could be matched to this one. So we open it up, see, and we could choose which one, Find Other Matches. Well, there's only one left because we matched the earlier one to the earlier downloaded one. So this one will match off, click Match, and we tell QuickBooks Online they have both been entered. And now we go to Con Edison, there's not that problem at all. And of course, if we go to Excluded, they're not excluded. In a way, they're categorized. And if you sort by bank detail, you'll get all of Con Edison's together. And only these two were matched to the different expenses.
Chapter 9. Using basic rules to save time.
And now, finally, we're going to get to the very best feature in the QuickBooks Online bank feeds, using rules. And rules are the feature that will save you massive amounts of time, energy, and attention when working with QuickBooks Online. Making a rule means you are telling QuickBooks Online that a transaction that was downloaded with a specific text must be recorded in a specific way with a specific set of data. This way, you don't have to put the data yourself, like choosing the expense account or choosing the vendor or even marking it billable for a particular customer. QuickBooks Online will do that automatically, and if you want, after it puts the data, it can automatically record it directly into the QuickBooks without you having to do anything. Now, the action that QuickBooks Online will take regarding any transaction that falls under a rule is based on the text that gets downloaded with the transaction. You see, the text that gets downloaded is coming from the description field from the bank's records. And the description field gets split into two different text fields once it's in the QuickBooks Online review list. The text from the description field sometimes goes in the memo field and sometimes goes in the bank text fields. And QuickBooks Online has two separate text fields for each transaction. Sometimes the description gets downloaded the same into both of those two fields, but sometimes it gets downloaded differently. So you have to make sure you tell QuickBooks Online which of the two text fields the rule will be based on. Then, once you decide which text field the text is that you need, you have to tell QuickBooks Online the criteria of this rule. That means you have to tell QuickBooks Online exactly how is this text placed or presented in that text field in order for QuickBooks Online to decide to execute the rule and record the transaction the way you asked it to. And the last thing you have to decide is if you want QuickBooks Online to simply put the data in the transaction and let you give it final approval before it gets recorded in the QuickBooks Online records, or do you want QuickBooks Online to just record it automatically based on how you set up the rule? The second part is the fun part because that's what makes QuickBooks Online go much, much faster. So to be clear, rules are instructions that you give to QuickBooks Online to automatically assign account categories and other data to transactions on the review list. And QuickBooks Online will add the data that you require to any downloaded or imported transaction based on the text in the bank detail text field. So this is the field that will have text downloaded, and based on what's there, you can tell QuickBooks Online to assign specific data to that transaction. So if you scroll all the way up to the top of the review list and click the tab that says, when your bank account is selected, click the tab that says Rules. Now, normally there would be a list of rules, but we have not created any yet. And of course, you would click New Rule if you wanted to create a new rule. Now, when you create a new rule from the rules list, you will see that at minimum, you must at least choose an account category that gets saved with the rule. That means an income account for deposits or an expense type of account for payments and checks. But you should also put the name of the person or company we got the money from or paid the money to. And of course, there are other fields of data that you can add along with that when you make a rule. But remember, the rules are all based on the specific downloaded text in the bank detail field. So you should know that usually the name of the person whom you're paying, person or company whom you're paying or got paid from, downloads in the description or memo field from the bank and goes into the bank detail field in the review list. So usually the name is there, but not always. But always remember, that's not the name field. That's not the official field of data for the person's name or the company's name. It just happens to be part of the text that's downloaded. You must choose a name and an account category because QuickBooks Online cannot know what person or company or even account category must go with that transaction. So let's do an example. Rule number 1. If the bank text contains the word candy, then you want QuickBooks Online to assign the name Candy Charles as the name of the person or customer in that transaction. And you want to assign the video income as the account category. Well, that's a very simple rule to create. So we'll make the name of this rule just Candy, or you could call it rule number 1 Candy. Okay, now, is it for money out or money in? Well, Candy is a customer, and many of the deposits came from her, so this rule applies to money coming in. Do you want it to apply to all of the bank accounts or the specific bank account that we're working on? Let's apply it to just this specific, well, hold on, remove this and choose only the bank account we're working on. And if the description contains exactly this, Candy. Now you can check how many there are by clicking Test Rule, and you'll see how many it would be applied to. The category will be video income, and the payee, they're not really the payee because it's money coming in, but it's really the name of the person, in this case the customer. So as soon as we save this rule, we want QuickBooks Online for every time the word candy is inside any of the bank text of the first bank account, we want QuickBooks Online to automatically assign the video income account and the payee as Candy. And as soon as we click Save, notice there's one rule on the list. But more interesting, if we click Bank Transactions and we scroll down to the section of Candy, notice instead of saying service income like it did a moment ago, it now says video income, and now the name field is not blank. Remember, this is not the name field, this is the bank text. This is the name field, and it assigned Candy. And even more beautifully, what you can do is you can go back to the Rules tab, and you can edit the rule, and you can make it so that in addition to automatically assigning the data that we want, you can also make it automatically confirm and approve and enter them into your QuickBooks Online records. You can do that by clicking Auto Confirm. Now if we save it, all of Candy's transactions will be gone from the review list because they will be recorded into QuickBooks Online as soon as we save the rule. Watch. We click Save, and now we go back to the Bank Transactions tab and notice Alan, Betty, Con Edison. Where's Candy? All of Candy's transactions were recorded. And you can check that by clicking Categorized. And you can see that all of Candy's transactions were recorded. And not only does it show you that they were recorded into QuickBooks Online, but it shows you it was auto-confirmed with a rule, and it even tells you the name of the rule. And if you were to check the reports for the very last time, because after this we'll just trust the process, you can go to Video Income and open it up, and you can see that all of Candy's transactions were in fact recorded into video income, and they were put there automatically by the rule. Let's try another rule just to make sure that we really understand this. Rule number 2, if the bank text contains the word Staples, then you want QuickBooks Online to assign Staples the vendor as the name of the person or company in the transaction, and you want supplies expense as the account category. Well, that's very simple. Scroll up, make sure you chose the correct bank account, go over to Rules, and click New Rule. Okay? Rule -2. You can add the name, you can add anything you want. And in this time, the rule applies to money going out because Staples is a vendor. And again, it could apply to all bank accounts, but if not, deselect all and select only the account you want the rule to apply to. Now, before you even add any data, well, you can't really test the rule until you put the text. If the description contains, okay, you must put each character correctly. Now that you have a criteria, okay, and you have the text, now you can test the rule to see how many it will apply to. Make the transaction type expense, and the account category will be supplies expense, okay, and the company or person whom we paid is Staples. So QuickBooks Online will apply these two fields of data to any transaction where the description field contains the word Staples. Now, it's on auto-confirm. Let's shut that off because we want to check it before. If you left this on and click Save, it would just happen automatically, and you would have to go to the categorized section. But click Save for now, and notice there are two rules that we could use, edit, delete, or do anything we want with it. But when we go back to the bank transaction section and scroll all the way to, look at that. Every transaction that has the bank text Staples now has the name Staples applied and the account supplies expense. It's chopped off because the page ran out of room, so you have to look at the top half of the other page as well. Okay, but we did not tell it to automatically enter it. We told QuickBooks Online just assign the name, assign the account, and let us check it. But if we wanted to, we could come back and edit rule number 2 and tell QuickBooks Online automatically confirm, save it into our QuickBooks records. That means if we save the rule like this, or if it was saved like this from the beginning, you will not see any Staples transactions at all in the For Review section. All of Staples transactions, none of them are here in For Review. They are now in the Categorized section, okay? And you can come down and you can see here are all of the ones that say Staples have the name Staples, supplies expense, and it specifically tells you that this was entered automatically with a rule, and it even tells you which rule it was. In fact, you can click on the name of the rule right here and go back to the rule and edit the rule if you want. So that seems pretty easy, but there are a couple of things you must remember. You must periodically double check all rules that you set to auto-enter. That's very important. That's because the bank text that downloads from the bank could suddenly change, and that happens all the time. So if you suddenly get bizarre results in your reports, it may be that the automatic rules have stopped because of a change in the text in the bank when it downloads from the bank for the very same transactions. Keep that in mind because banks do funny things and vendors and customers do funny things that cause the text that the rules are dependent on to suddenly change without you knowing. So keep that in mind. And the last thing I would like to say is, what I just showed you are only the basic rules and the basic idea of rules. We're going to circle back to the topic of rules and do the advanced rules and advanced parts of rules later in the course, and that will really give you total control over everything that gets entered into your QuickBooks Online records.
Chapter 10. Applying deposits and payments to invoices and bills.
And now it's time to learn a very convenient feature that's included in the Bank Feeds review list. You're able to apply downloaded transactions to unpaid bills and customers' open invoices. You see, the normal way you would do this is in the receive payment window for customers when a customer is making a payment that they want you to apply to one of the open invoices. And when you pay your bills, you would do it in the Pay Bills window, and that window would give you control over which particular vendor's bill to apply the bill payment to. But you can do both of these things from the review list. So how do we know if something was applied to an invoice that's open? Well, the only way to do that is to look at the open invoice report. Now we know when we receive a payment from a customer and we record it in the Receive Payments window, we know that that received payment transaction is listed on several reports. But the only report that will actually tell you or show you which particular invoice that particular payment was applied to is right here in the open invoice report. What would happen if you applied a customer's payment to a particular invoice would be that the balance or the open balance of that particular invoice on the open invoice report would change by the amount you applied it to. And that's the only real evidence that a particular payment was applied to a particular invoice. So let's save the open invoice report in our custom area because we will be working with the open invoice report in this section. So it's very simple. We go to Reports, okay, and Standard Reports, and we go down to the section of Who Owes You. And we see that in the section of Who Owes You, there is the Open Invoice Report right here. Click on it. And you can look at it in the new way, or you can switch to Classic View. But make sure that you choose All Dates and then click Run Report. And then after you run report, you click Save Customization. And when you do that, you will see that when you go to the Customize section, if you click Reports, Custom, you will see that the Open Invoice Report is saved on the custom list. And now, unfortunately, we need to take a quick moment to download the setup transactions, the transactions that we will be working with for this example. So you would download this Excel file, set up for applying payment right here. Please download that to your computer the same way that you downloaded all the other files that we've been working with from the same place that you downloaded all the other Excel files. And it should only take about 5 minutes to record these 3 invoices in the way that they're shown here, and record these 3 vendor bills in the way that they're shown here. And of course, if you don't know how to record invoices from customers or bills from vendors, certainly there are other videos and courses on this very website that you can take, and you can reach out and ask me, and I'll be happy to send you the link. But for those of you who know how to record exactly these 6 transactions, please go ahead and record them so that when you finish, your open invoice report looks like this. The open invoice report will show, actually for all dates, it will show these 2 transactions for Alan. And you know what? Maybe I'll zoom in a little and I'll show you what it would look like after you enter the setup invoices. And again, you might have to change views to classic view if you want to see the whole thing at once, but that's fine. So after you finish recording these 3 invoices, this is the way your open invoice report should look. Now you're ready to see the steps to apply any deposit downloaded into the review list to any particular open invoice. First, you have to click to open up the transaction that you want to apply to the open invoice, and you have to click Match. Now, it's not the same matching that we did earlier, but it's the same button that you have to click. And once you click that, you will see the same window that you saw before, but in that window, you will have to tell QuickBooks Online that you're looking for a list of the open invoices, and you also have to tell QuickBooks Online the date range that those invoices have been recorded in. Once you do that, this window will open up and you will be able to see all the unpaid open invoices for customers that are waiting to be paid for, and you'll see it right at the bottom of the window you opened up to match. Then all you have to do is apply the payment just like you would if you were in the receive payment window. So let's do this as an example. In the second bank account, the one we worked with much earlier in the course, there's a specific deposit dated January 6, 2020, and we would like to apply that $500 deposit to invoice number 14 for Alan, dated 20/20/2026. So this is the payment we're applying, and this is the invoice we're going to apply it to. So watch and follow along with us. When we come back to the open invoice report, invoice number 14 will not show a $1,000 remaining balance. Instead, invoice number 14 will show a $500 remaining balance because it was applied to this particular invoice, or at least a $500 payment was. Now, I'm going to zoom back out and I'm going to go to the bank transactions, and the instructions specifically say that we're using the second bank account with all the stuff that we downloaded. Now, take my advice. Because the date range is so wide, it's better to click Amount and have the arrow facing down, which means largest to smallest. Go down slowly until you see the January 6 $500. So here are all the $500 payments, and here we are. This one. This one here is a $500 payment that we received on this date, and we want to apply it to Alan's invoice number 14. So watch what we need to do. Step 1, click to open it up. Step 2, click Match. Notice when you click Match, we're in the window, but we don't see anything because the date range is not what we need. In this example, unfortunately, because it's a class at school, we need to pick a very wide date range. So let's try April 1 of 2025, which is the start of this month, to December 31 of 2026, just to make sure in our example we have a wide enough date range to cover what we're looking for. And we also want to see only the open invoices. I guess we have to choose the transaction type before we choose the date range. So we'll go from the beginning of the month that I'm working on to the end of 2026, just to be sure that all of Alan's open invoices are included in this date range. Apply. Now we can see all three of the open invoices that showed up here are open invoices within this date range. And notice we have $500 available to apply from this deposit. Now, if we click the check mark on the one that we want, it will apply the whole thing. And we'll keep this example simple. But anyone who has experience applying payments to invoices knows that this area looks just like the receive payment window, and you can distribute the payment to other invoices if you need. Now, when we click match, we're going to go and take a look at the open invoice report, reports, custom, and we go open invoice. And you can see for Alan's invoice number 14, instead of $1,000, the remaining balance is now only $500. And we can even double click and open up the invoice and look at the history, more actions. We could see audit history, and you can see this invoice was created by me on this date, and a $500 payment was applied on this date. So you can see the history of what was applied to the invoice in that way. And now when we go back to the review list for the second bank account, we can see, of course, if we zoom out a bit, we can look at the categorized section and see that this was added to as a payment. Here, let's make this column wider. See, added a payment to the invoice, and it explains everything in the categorized field, and it's no longer in the for review section. So now let's do the exact same thing on the vendor side with the unpaid bills. And it all starts with putting the unpaid bill report in the customized section. So if you go to Reports, Standard Reports, and scroll down to the section of whom you owe or what you owe, you will eventually get to the unpaid bill report. Now, the best thing to do is leave the date range all dates, and you could switch to classic view if you don't want to scroll up and down. It's totally up to you. But at the moment, it looks the way you need it to look. By the way, it should look like this if you entered the 3 setup unpaid bills so that you can see how it works in this section. But if we run report and it looks the way we need it to look, we simply click Save Customization and then click Save. Now the unpaid bill reports will be there when we click for Custom Reports, and we go right here, Unpaid Bills. And now that we're set up, let's do an example. Let's look at this transaction in the second bank account that was downloaded for $500 with the name Merrick Bank in the text field that's dated February 8th of 2019. And we're going to apply that payment to this particular bill from Con Edison that happens to be unpaid. So we are applying $500 to bill number 8181, the bill from Con Edison that was dated 6/16/26. So if we look at the unpaid bill report right now, you can see that that bill from Con Edison is $3,000. Here, we'll zoom in a bit. $3,000. And we are applying a $500 payment that was downloaded into the review list to this $3,000 bill, which means when we finish, the only evidence that the payment was applied to the correct bill would be to have this bill have an open unpaid amount of $2,500. So let's zoom back out and take a look at how we record this. We go back to the bank feeds window, make sure we select the second bank account. Now again, in our example in school, it's better to sort by amount and make the triangle facing up, so we have the negative numbers first. And when we get to the section where it's all 500, we can look closely for the February 2nd $500 transaction, February 8th, and here it is. This is the one that mentions Merrick Bank in the text field, February 8th for $500. So this is the one that we're going to apply to the unpaid bill. And we click here. And now again, we're not matching it the way we matched in an earlier video, but if you want to apply it to an unpaid bill, you have to click Match. And now we get to the Find Other Matches window. And now what we're looking for is bills. And we're looking for bills, or specifically bill payments, within a certain date range. So again, the date range has to be the range of the payments. So since I'm filming this in April of 25, we make sure that we have a wide span of date range. Like you would in a real situation, make sure the date range includes the payment you want. And when we click Apply, you can see here are all three of the unpaid bills within this date range. And we want to apply it to this one, number 8181. And again, if the money amount is less than the bill, all you have to do is click the check mark and the money amount will go right there, and this will decrease to $2,500. So we click Match, and now when we come back to for the second bank account to the categorized section, you can see that this has been categorized. We open it up and we see it was applied to, it was made as a bill payment applied to the bill that was dated, that it was this payment on this date applied to that bill. And you can click to open it up and you can see exactly what happened. And if you click Reports and go back to Custom Reports, Unpaid Bill, you will see the amount of the unpaid bill for bill number 8181 decreased to the $2,500, just like we, got to scroll to the right, just like we expected it to.
Chapter 11, Tracking Expenses and Billables.
Did you know that you could track your expenses by customer or by job right from the Bank Feed Center? Well, for those of you who don't know what that is, here's a quick overview of how we would normally be able to track your expenses by customer or job. The first thing you would do would be to open the Settings window and go to the Expenses tab, and then to make sure that this particular option is activated. And we're going to do this together in a moment. But once you activate this, that means that when you open the expense window to record an expense normally, QuickBooks Online adds this additional field to the expense window so that you're able to tell QuickBooks Online which particular customer or job this expense is for. And then once you save it that way, this report will show you the actual profit and loss by customer by showing you how much you made for each customer on the top section and how much the expenses were for that specific customer here in the bottom section. And this is the report that shows you your profit and loss tracked when you use tracking for expenses by customer or job. So let's go ahead and activate ours together. We go to the top right in the cog wheel, click the cog wheel, and then we go all the way to the left, and you're either seeing account settings or company settings if you happen to have the accountant's edition instead of the plus version like we do. Now you're here in the settings window, and you need to click the expenses tab. And notice, track expenses and items by customer, in my case, is already green. It's already active if it's green. Now, if it's already active, or if you're activating it now, make sure this says on, it's green. You have to save the little section, and then in the bottom right, click done to make sure it's active. Now, if you were to click the plus sign and open the expense window, you would see that there's a field here to track with customer or project, and you can track your expenses by customer or job. And now that it's activated, you should see a field in the review list when you open up a transaction that allows you to select a customer that goes along with any expense that was downloaded into the review list. So let's save the profit and loss by customer in our customized report section so that we can open it up right after we do our example, because that's the report that shows the results when you track expenses by customer. So we go to Reports, Standard Reports, and in the section of Business Overview, you can see profit and loss by customer. Here it is. Click to open it up. Now, I like the classic view. You don't have to switch to classic view, but what you have to do is make the report run with all dates so that you at least see the way it looks for now. We've had expenses, but they weren't tracked to the customers. And we had income tracked by customer because that does that naturally when we record invoices, deposits, and sales receipts. So now that this looks the way we need it to look, we're going to click Save Customization, click Save, and now we know that when we click Reports, Custom Reports, we have the profit and loss by customer we can click on and come right back to see the results right after we do our example. And now that the report is saved, let's do an example. Let's imagine that in the second bank account, the bank account that we imported the QBO file earlier in the course, we're imagining that the July 18th, 2019 transaction for $411.84 that says payment to Chase card in 403 or ending in 4303, we happen to know that this expense is supposed to be delivery expense, and we were also paying delivery specifically for Alan Arby, the customer, and one of the jobs we were doing for him. So I happen to know that this particular expense would be on page 5 if we sorted the register the right way. So you have to sort this to get to this transaction more quickly, because this second bank account that we're working on has several pages of transactions, you see. So if you click the arrow, I happen to know if you click the date arrow to sort by the date column and it's pointing up, I happen to know that this transaction is somewhere on the 5th page scrolling down. And it might be a little different for you, but that's approximately where it would be, so it would make it easy to find. Here it is. July 18th, 2019, $411.84. So we have to click to open it up. Now, we have to put in the category, and in this case, it's DE, delivery expense. Okay, you could put UPS. Well, it's for whom you paid is UPS, but watch the customer that this expense was for, so we can track it by customer or job. In this example, is Alan Arby. Now when we click confirm, we know it's been entered into the QuickBooks records. Watch, we can click reports, custom reports, and go to the profit and loss by customer. And now you can see for the very first time in the expense section under a particular customer, we have the expense that we just recorded tracked to this particular expense, this particular customer. Now you should also know that you can actually bill the customer for the tracked expense. You see, if you're in the settings window and you also make sure in the very same place that this option is turned on, make expenses and items billable to customers, right under the other one, if that's turned on, you also have the option to click the checkbox, and QuickBooks Online will give you the ability to bill the customer later. And then once you indicate this expense is to be billed to a certain customer, it will show up on a report called unbilled charges. So let's save the unbilled charges to the custom section of reports. We click reports, standard reports, and we go down to the section of expenses and vendors, sales tax for my accountant. It's in the section of who owes you. Who owes you? Unbilled charges. We click on it. And again, I like Classic View. You don't have to switch to Classic View. Make sure it says all dates when you click Save Customization and Save. Now, when you go to the Custom Reports, Reports Custom, you see that unbilled charges are here. And anytime we mark something as billable that we're planning on billing the client for later, it will show up in this report. And now that we're set up, let's do this example of billables. Let's imagine the transaction on May 18th, 2020 for $782.41 that says in the text field, online payment number blah, blah, blah to Synchrony Bank, is actually for electric expense that we need to pay for customer Candy Charles and doing one of the jobs for her. So we can actually track this to the customer, but in addition to that, it's also billable to Candy. So we're going to have to mark it billable, and we'll see what that does. So we go back to transactions, bank transactions, make sure we choose the second bank account, and again, we want May 18th of 2020. So we can sort it with the arrow facing down. Oop, I don't know what is going on here. But if we sort it with the arrow facing down, then the transactions for 2020 come up, and we want May 18th. So we go down. It's on the first. Here it is, May 18th. Here it is, May 18th for $782.41. We click to open it up. Okay, now we might have paid Con Edison for the electricity, but the most important thing to add is that this is electricity expense, but specifically it's for this customer's job, Candy Charles. And in this example, we're going to mark it as billable. And this is the way the open transaction section should look at the moment we click confirm. Now let's check if it's on the report. We go to Reports, Custom Reports, and we go down and we check Unbilled Charges, and we see there's only one. The one we just recorded from the review list is now formally recorded in QuickBooks Online and affecting the reports, and here it is, unbilled, waiting to be billed. Now we're getting a little off topic if I show you exactly how to bill it to the customer, but I'll do that quickly for those of you who have never seen this before. You click New, Invoice if you want to bill it to the customer, and as soon as you choose the customer, any billable expenses would come up here in the side panel. And if you want to use it, you would just click Add. And then you could, in addition to that, add anything else additional that you want to add to the invoice before you would click Save and Close. Now you can see it's gone from the unbilled charges because you actually placed it on an invoice. And again, we're getting a little off topic regarding the topic of importing transactions, but I wanted everyone to see the whole picture. And if you need more information about tracking expenses and billing clients, certainly you could contact me for my recommendation of the next course that you could take.
Chapter 12, Advanced Level Rules.
Now we're going to enjoy the benefit of your teacher's experience by learning about advanced rule issues that will really make you the highest level expert in using bank feeds in QuickBooks Online. Sometimes the downloaded bank text can make rules difficult to use. Sometimes there's similar text in a variety of transactions that will make a rule work in a way that you do not want it to work. So if you just follow these guidelines right here in this video chapter, you will be able to make rules that work for any type of downloaded text. And again, I'm giving you the benefit of my experience for all of the pitfalls that I experienced helping clients when setting up rules. So the first thing we have to do in order to physically work with this together is to create an example account that we can use in our QuickBooks Online account to experience these advanced rule issues. So the first thing we need to do is delete all of the prior rules so that even if you did not make a mistake in creating the prior rules, it will still not have any kind of effect even if you have a problem with your account. So let's go ahead and do that together. We click Rules, and you can select all of them at once, and then click Delete. Again, if we click the box in the column heading, it selects every rule. Now yours will look different from mine because I was playing around with my account in order to create the videos and make a good plan. But whatever rules you have, don't worry. You can always put them back if you want to experiment later. Make sure they're all selected, and then the pull down for batch actions, and then click Delete. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. Now we will create for this lesson a bank type of account and import the transactions for the advanced rule lesson that you're about to experience. So look for the file that says Add to Account 1 for Advanced. Now you need to download this from the exact same place that you downloaded all the prior files that we have been working with thus far. And once you do that, you have to put it in the proper folder so that you can select it. So go back to Bank Transactions, and if you want, you can pause the video and you can go and create a new account in your chart of accounts for this example. Then when you unpause, you can come back to the Bank Feed Center and click Upload from File. And then, of course, you can click to select the folder find the file you're looking for that has this name that you hopefully downloaded a moment ago, double click, and you can see which file you're importing. Then, of course, we click Continue like we did before. And now let's choose the example account in your chart of accounts. Now, you could add an account right here, and let's name it Advanced Example, or anything you want. It doesn't matter as long as you're working with that account in this chapter. And of course, it will be a bank type of account. And let's be on the safe side and choose checking, so it would more normally reflect a normal situation. Once we have these three pieces of data, just click Save. Now we know which account the file is going to import into. And we click Continue. And remember from prior videos, when we're here, we just confirm the date format is usually the top choice. If not, then double check the file. We agree that the artificial intelligence chose the correct column headings for the correct fields of data within QuickBooks Online. Click Continue, and we have a nice little review about how to import transactions. We could do this one by one or select all of them because we agree that we would like to import all of these in this example. Now, of course, I'm going more quickly than I normally would because we have done this twice before in the course. I just want to quickly set up for the Advanced Rules chapter. So we click Continue. Are you absolutely sure? Yes. And now we have, if we click Done, now we have another account in the Bank Feed Center and the Review List that we can look at and see the transactions. Here it is, Advanced Example, so we click on it. Now, sometimes it takes time to load if you just imported, so don't worry. You see it says loading. Don't worry. Glitches happen all the time when you use your QuickBooks Online account. You just have to wait a little bit for it. And sometimes it even helps if you refresh the browser and give it a moment. There it is. You might even have to close the browser and log in fresh to give it a full opportunity to load into the review list. So now we can sort by date like we learned before, or we can sort by bank detail, which is the most helpful way to sort, especially if we're working with rules. So now let's use this account as an example for a complex situation. You see, the word Betty is within 14 transactions of the ones that you just put into the review list. However, the word solo is in a total of 15 transactions where 6 of Betty's transactions do not have the word solo. And to make it more complicated, some of Candy's transactions do have the word solo. So therefore, you cannot make a rule with only the word Betty or only the word solo. What you need in this case is a compound rule, a rule with 2 conditions rather than 1. So if both text items are anywhere in the bank text or description, then QuickBooks Online will execute the rule. So let's make this compound rule. If the text contains the word Betty and contains the word solo, then this will be video income and the customer name will be Betty. So let's take a look at how we would do this. Now, of course, we would come up and click Rules. And just like we learned, we click New Rule. And we can name this rule Betty 1 because we might need 2 rules. And it pertains to money coming in. And it only applies to the example bank account that we just created, Advanced Example. So let's remove the check mark from all bank accounts and click here, Advanced Example. Now, see that that's the only one selected. Now the description contains Betty. Now here's the interesting thing that I wish to share with you from experience. You should always test the rule. If you know how many that rule should apply to, you have to test it to see if it's working correctly. And again, QuickBooks Online has a lot of nuances and glitches even. So when we click test rule, we see that it's working fine. And it says the rule will apply to 14 currently unreviewed transactions, which makes sense. 6 do not have the word solo and 8 do, but a total of 14 for Betty. Now, before I move on, I want to explain that if you saw the number 0, you would have to do this. Let's take a moment and let me give you a piece of advice from my experience. If you have a problem that the number 0 is coming up, that means instead of choosing the description field, you should change it to bank text or vice versa. And you may well ask, what's the difference? Now, they're usually the same, but the actual description that downloads goes here in the memo field exactly as it downloads from the bank. But the bank detail, which is the text, the name of the column heading here, is sometimes the same, or sometimes it's an AI, artificial intelligence, that abbreviates the text that downloaded in order to group things together and to help you. So you have to be careful because sometimes they're not the same. So if you try to test the rule and you know it should work and it doesn't, try both text fields to see if it works. And again, how would you do that? Try this and then do test rule. See, 14. In this case, it's the same, but it won't always be the same. So if you get a bizarre result, the first thing you should do is double check these two pieces of data and also check to see if you switch the text field. So we want to make a rule for a transaction that has both the word Betty and also the word solo. And only if it has both, you will choose video income as the category. So we have to add condition. And if the description also contains SOLO somewhere in the same text field. Now, of course, when we test the rule, you can see that it applies to fewer transactions. Watch, if we delete Betty and we put only solo and test the rule, it applies to 15 transactions, but only some of them also have the word Betty. So if we add the condition of the word Betty exactly as it downloaded from the bank, now only 8 have both. And the category will be V for video income. And of course, the payee, which is really the name of the person because the customer is not a payee. And that's it. Let us not auto confirm because we want to observe the result in the review list. So this is our first example of a compound rule, and we click save, and here it is on the list. And now when we go back to bank transactions and wait a bit, we can see that the ones that have both Betty and the word solo have been assigned video income as the account and Betty as the name. The other ones with Betty, not assigned anything yet. The other ones with solo, not assigned anything yet. So you need a compound rule, especially in the case where the two things that are in the text are separated by something that will be different every time. Now, the second example that I would like to give you from my experience is a situation where the artificial intelligence cannot help you. Let's imagine we purchase only equipment from any Staples except the Staples in the Midway Mall. And notice this is a different Staples than the one that you're familiar with. It's spelled with 2 P's, in order to avoid any kind of lawsuit. So again, we purchase only equipment from any other Staples except the Staples from the Midway Mall. And let's imagine from the Midway Mall Staples, we sometimes purchase equipment and sometimes purchase supplies. So this is the first example where we use the does not contain condition in the rule for all the other Staples. And that would be the only thing that would work if this were your situation. So if we sort by the bank detail column and we click the arrow facing down, we will get the ones at the end of the alphabet. And again, here we have Staples alone with no other text, and we have these Staples Midway Mall. So how will we make the rule so that QuickBooks Online can put the correct account from the correct condition? Well, let's go up here and click Rules, zoom back into normal, okay? We're making a new rule, and let's call this Staples 1, all right? It pertains to money out, and again, let's make it pertain to only the example bank account so we don't mess up the account too much. Now, of course, the description should contain Staples with two P's specifically to teach you that if you're one character off, your rule will not work properly. And if you click test the rule, you can see there are 17, but not all 17 say the Midway Mall. Only some of them do. Now we're going to add a condition, and in this case, the condition is does not contain Midway Mall. So for all the Staples that do not contain Midway Mall, how many are there? There's only 7. 7 out of the bunch we saw a moment ago. Now, if the condition is it says only Staples and it's not the Midway Mall Staples, then no matter what, we know we are buying equipment. So make that the rule, and the people or the company that we paid is Staples. Don't worry about the spelling. Do not put auto confirm. Keep it gray. Don't make it green. Keep it gray so that we can first see the results in the review list. Now when we click save and we go back to bank transactions sorted this way, you can see that the ones that say only Staples, not the ones that have the Midway Mall, the ones that say only Staples have been assigned equipment. And now we have an opportunity to make things even more convenient by zooming in to the Midway Mall Staples transactions and putting rules for that so that all of them can be entered automatically. Let's imagine that if in fact you purchase something from the Midway Mall, any transaction over 500 will definitely be for equipment, and any transaction under 500 is for supplies. So that will even help you make more transactions recorded automatically. And you're only limited by your imagination. So you see, the ones that have the Midway Mall, they're not categorized yet. You see? In fact, well, some of them are, but we don't quite know why yet, but we didn't make the rule. And we will come up here and we will click Rule. And we will click New Rule. And this rule can be named Staples-2. And it's about money out. Again, to be safe, remove the check mark from all bank accounts and let's only apply it to the advanced example bank account. And if the description contains both Staples, Midway Mall, remember it's all about how it downloaded into the text field. You have to spell it that way. If it contains Staples Midway Mall and the amount is greater than 500. Let's test that rule and see how many there are. There's only 2 transactions with the amount larger than 500 that have the text Staples Midway Mall. And what do we want to do? We want to make sure that EQ, equipment, is the category, and we purchased it and paid Staples. Now let's click Save. And of course, we already saw, because I was preparing the account for the lesson, we already saw before we made the rule that the artificial intelligence remembered what I was doing before. But anyway, it executed the rule. It put the payee Staples and it put equipment for only the ones that say Staples Midway Mall. And these are the only 2 that are greater than 500. New rule, and we can name it Staples-3. And of course, this applies to money going out, not from all bank accounts, just the advanced example bank account that we're working with. And of course, the text is Staples Midway Mall, but in this case, we add a condition if the amount is less than 500. And we test the rule, and we see it applies to the other 8 transactions that are the Staples Midway Mall. And of course, if the rule applies, we want to automatically assign supplies expense, and of course, we paid the same vendor. And then we click Save. Now let's check the result of this 4th rule. We click Bank Transactions, and we can see that all the ones for the Midway Mall Staples have been assigned the correct payee, but notice the ones that are smaller than the amount of $500 have been assigned supplies expense. And that's even though the text is the same as the other 2. Congratulations, you're now on an advanced level of bank feeds and importing transactions.
Chapter 13, Disconnecting from the Review List.
And now it's time to finish our course with the very important topic of disconnecting a bank account from the review list. Your bank account is connected to the review list after the very first time you either imported or downloaded any transactions into that particular account when using the review list and the bank feed center. Now, the problem with that is that once you've categorized transactions, they will remain on the categorized list forever. This means that any time in the future, you can undo a transaction as long as they're still listed there. And that condition may be a problem for you in the future. You see, that condition will remain forever until you actually disconnect the account from the review list. Because someone may accidentally undo the transactions that were already reconciled or already recorded in a closed past accounting period. That's why you may, at some point, need to disconnect the account from the review list so they will disappear and you will not be at risk. You will automatically be reconnected as soon as you import new transactions. So don't worry about this. You're just clearing out the categorized section. So if you were to do this to a transaction, if you were to go to the categorized section and undo a transaction that was already marked as cleared and reconciled, you would get this message. You're messing up a past accounting period that you already told QuickBooks and QuickBooks Online that it matches the bank account. So that's the condition we're trying to avoid by removing everything from the Categorize section, and the only way to do that is to disconnect. So how do you disconnect? Well, you edit the account that you want to disconnect and you click this checkbox, and then only when you save the account after clicking the checkbox will it be disconnected from the review list. So let's do this together with bank account number 2, because bank account number 2 still has items in the categorized field that we might want to get rid of. So make sure that you chose the second bank account here, and make sure you choose the Categorized tab. And if your account is anything like mine, again, you might have been experimenting, which is fine, so you might see it a little differently. But if you click the second bank account and you click Categorized, wow, there's plenty there. And someone could come along and mess it up by clicking Undo on any one of these if they were reconciled or recorded in a closed period. So here's what you do. You click the pencil and then you click Edit Account Info. Now all you have to do is click the check mark that I mentioned a moment ago and then click Yes. And then when you save it, okay, you do kind of have to refresh the window here, refresh the browser, and when it reloads, you will see the bank account that you disconnected will no longer be listed in the review list. See, it's gone. Now, even if you re-imported the same file, the categorized field would be empty. This is the first bank account, not the one we just got rid of. But let's re-import and see what happens. So we do what we learned and we click Link Account Upload. And I hope that you remember when you click to search for the file, I hope you'll remember that originally we imported this file. It's a .qbo file, downloaded transactions. That's the one that we imported into the second bank account, the one we just disconnected. So we click Open, and then we confirm it's the right one. We click Continue. Now we select the second bank account like we did originally. Click Continue, and then we click Done. When we come back, it's back in the review list, but notice when we go to Categorized, we see that nothing is there, and the only thing that will be there now is anything from this point forward that we actually categorize.
Chapter 14. All bookkeeping in 1 second per day.
Did you know that 90% of the companies can do 90% of their bookkeeping in less than 90 seconds a day? It's true. And it's true because of the feature that we just finished learning about. You see, if you combine two things that we learned in this course, combining directly downloading your transactions from the bank, combined with the rules that we learned about, allows 90% of the companies to do 90% of their bookkeeping in 90 seconds a day. You see, we remember that you can download in just one simple click all of the transactions that were not yet downloaded. And that keeps things nice and neat just by clicking Update. But you see, if you set up rules, that means that the rules will immediately classify the data you entered, and then as soon as they're entered into the review list, they will be put into QuickBooks Online. So you connect directly to the bank, the transactions immediately come from the bank into the review list, and only the ones that were not yet downloaded. And then as soon as they get into the review list, the rules immediately put them into the QuickBooks Online reports and records. So in a blink of an eye, you have done most of your bookkeeping. Here, watch what it looks like if I actually do it in QuickBooks Online. See, you want to see how to do it? Watch. See? Boom. That's it. We're done. One click and we're done. Whatever shows up here are transactions that were not there, and only the ones that were updated are the ones that came in since the last time you click up there. We'll try it again. Click. Here it is. Boom. And in 90 seconds or just a few seconds, boom, all the ones that were set up with rules were already recorded into the QuickBooks Online records. Now, of course, you agree that that's fast and easy, but why does it cover so much? Well, that's because in most cases, 90% of the transactions that most companies have are bank-related transactions or credit card-related transactions, which means 90% of the transactions get recorded in either the bank's records or the credit card's records. You see, the credit cards and the bank account are part of the main area of data. And the main area of data, as we all know, is the general ledger, which in QuickBooks Online we call the chart of accounts. So if you're using the bank feeds feature, you're addressing the main area of data where most of the transactions are recorded in. So you can get away with this if you don't have other areas of data to manage. So that brings us to our next question. Exactly what parts of QuickBooks Online can the bank feeds feature not help us with? Well, the only parts it can't help us with are what I call the peripheral areas of data. Areas of data like customers and accounts receivables and the details of individual customers' balances. And it's the same thing on the accounts payable side with unpaid bills and the balance of each open bill that still needs to be paid. Those details cannot be managed from the bank feed center or the review list. What about inventory management and inventory quantities? Inventory is a separate subsidiary area of data that your company needs to keep detailed records of that you can't do from the bank feed center. And of course, the interesting one is sales tax. Sales tax is also a peripheral, separate area of detailed data that has to be kept track of separately from the general ledger in the chart of accounts. And let's talk about each of these areas and what the bank feed center cannot do for you in those areas. So for example, customers and receivables. Of course, we can record deposits and receiving payments, and we can apply those payments to invoices and track them by customer and bill them. But what we cannot do from the bank feed center is actually create the invoices and create the credits, and we can't manage their balances or their statements, and we certainly can't create estimates for companies that have contracts or long-term contracts and then match the invoices against those estimates. That's called progress invoicing, and that's all in the separate area of accounts receivable that the bank feed center cannot do for us. And it's the same thing on the payable side for vendors. We can't enter bills or enter bill credits from the review list. And we certainly can't manage the vendor's balances or reconcile their statements from the review list. So you would still need to learn the accounts payable section as well. And of course, if you have details of merchandise inventory, you would not be able to manage the quantities on hand. And you certainly would not be able to adjust your inventory for spoilage or theft or anything like that. So you would have to learn the separate data area of inventory and merchandise related transactions that you cannot do from the review list. And of course, if you're only using the review list, you would not be able to take advantage of advanced inventory features like the unit of measure feature, which is very important if you're managing a high volume of different types of merchandise inventory that you're buying and selling from your vendors to your customers. And the most interesting area of peripheral data is the sales tax. And you need to know that QuickBooks Online has a separate sales tax feature to help you manage and track your sales tax, so you always know whom you owe the different sales tax to and the amount you owe them, and manage those details like adjusting what's owed for an overpayment or an underpayment and so on. And of course, the sales tax feature also has reminders of when you're supposed to pay any and all of the different sales tax that your company is required to pay. You can't manage that through the review list, even though most of the work can be done through the review list. Now, here's the issue with sales tax that I want to mention before you finish the course. Sometimes when you download deposits into the review list, the sales tax is included in the deposit. So what you would have to do in that case, because you could not use the sales tax feature, you would have to do what we call the old sales tax split. Well, what does that mean if a deposit downloads and it's income, but it also includes the sales tax? To split a transaction means to put more than one account category that you assign to the transaction. So what am I talking about? Well, if you needed to put more than one account category, you would first open the transaction and you would click split transaction, and the screen would change and give you the ability to put two different account categories for the same transaction. And this 1,925 is going to be our example. Let's imagine that we received a deposit of $1,009.25, and just for illustrative purposes, let's imagine that 1,000 of that deposit is video income that we earned, and let's imagine $9.25 is the sales tax. Well, how would you perform the old sales tax split? Well, it's very simple. Let me show you. If you're in the review list and you're looking at the actual transaction in that amount, like let's say, for example, this transaction, it's a deposit from Candy where we earned video income, but some of that includes the sales tax. It's very simple. We click to open up the transaction. We click split transaction. Then, of course, we received both of these from Candy because it's a total payment of $1,009.25. But you see, only $1,000 is for video income. And when you split a transaction like this, you put the sales tax payable here, which is a current liability, and you put the amount of the transaction that is the tax. Now you can see the total of each account adds up to the total of the deposit in order for you to apply and confirm. And after you apply and confirm and save it, you will see that the sales tax payable account has $9.25 in it. And from this transaction, video income will only have 1,000. Apply and confirm, and now it's categorized, okay, and it's no longer here on the review list. You can see it's been categorized right here, and if you look at the trial balance, you can see that sales tax payable showed up for the first time as $9.25. So that's how you would handle your sales tax if you received deposits where tax was included and you needed to use the review list. So if both sales tax and products and services can be entered into the review list, it therefore means that 90% of the companies can do 90% of their bookkeeping in 90 seconds a day. And I do thank all of you so much for taking this course all the way till the end. You really do have more power over QuickBooks Online than you can possibly imagine if you understood and you can remember everything you learned in this course. I wish you good luck on your project and test, and please stay in touch.
Chapter 15. Time to take the test.
Now let's see if we can have a little fun cleaning out your account, which means preparing your account for your very first practice project. Now there are two ways to start your account with 0 so that you can do the exercise and finish with the same numbers. You could create a new QuickBooks Online account, or you could remove everything from this account yourself. In both cases, you'd be starting with 0 and you'd be able to begin the practice project. So if you started a new account just for this course, we can remove everything together. Now, I honestly don't know if you will have the same numbers that I have at this point, because I had to manipulate the numbers a little in the account to do things to create the course. So if you have these numbers, that's fine. But honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter, because we're going to remove everything so that all the numbers start at 0 and you have no transactions in the account when you start your first practical project exercise. So the reason we can do this so easily is because most of the things are here in the Categorize tab. That's if you've been following along step by step and started an account at the beginning like we did. So what we'll do is we will undo one page at a time, and that will move everything back to the review list. Then once it's back in the review list, we'll exclude them and then we'll delete them. Okay, but right now we're here. So how do we do this? Well, we go back to Transactions, Bank Transactions. Make sure you choose this first bank account, the one we're working on. Now, notice there's still some for review. So the first thing we have to do is click Categorized, and for all the ones that were already categorized, we can undo all of them. And we can do the entire page. Now, in my example, I only have one page of categorized items. But if you had more, you'd have to do it until all the pages were done. Watch. We come up here and we click the box at the very top, and that selects everything on the entire page. Now, in one big batch, we can click, well, actually, undo. We're doing it one at a time, but when we do it this way, okay, we can get rid of that. And now it gives you the ability to undo everything that was selected. And everything on the page is selected, and we click undo. 39 transactions, continue. You might have a different number, but whatever they are, undo all of them. Okay? Now it says, now they're moved back to the review tab. Click OK. So now they're all back here, all 122, and none are here. Are there any excluded that we forgot? No. But if so, you would click undo so that they're all back on the review list. And now that they're all back in the review list, let's exclude all of them one page at a time. So, same idea, but before I start, I'm going to scroll down and show you. We're going to have to do this 3 times for 3 separate pages. So, you could change the order, but it won't matter because ultimately they'll all be gone. So we click the box next to date to select all of them, but ultimately we can only select all of them on the current page. So now that they're all selected, I can click Exclude. And notice we're down to 72. There's a bunch in the Excluded tab, and there's only 72 left. If we scroll down, see we only have 2 pages left to exclude. So we do it again. Select all of them, exclude. Now we can see there's only 1 page or even less than a page left. Select all of them again. They're all selected. Exclude. Now, nothing is in the Review tab, nothing is in the Categorize tab, and everything is in the Excluded tab. And now that they're in the Excluded tab, let's delete all of them, and then they'll really be permanently gone. So we're in the Excluded tab. How many pages? Scroll down. Looks like we have 3 pages of transactions to delete. Click the box next to date to select all on the page, all on the first page. Delete. Now you can see there's only 2 pages left. Select them all. Delete. Now there's only 1 page left. Select them all. Delete. Now they're all gone. Now let's take a look at the trial balance. Reports, Custom, Trial Balance. And you can see there are still transactions there. My rules were messed up. I deleted them and they still recorded anyway. It doesn't work right. So what do we do with this mess? Well, any remaining transactions, you will have to pause this video and remove one by one. So if you have the same that I have, you can just double click this 200 and you'll probably get the transactions we entered manually for the matching lesson. So once they're in front of you, as we all know, we double click each one, one by one. And at the bottom, we click More, Delete, Delete. Now that one is gone. Okay. Now, second one, double click when it's in front of you, More, Delete, Delete. And we do that for every transaction that we see that remains in any account in the trial balance. Okay, let's go back. You have to kind of refresh it sometimes. Reports, Custom, Trial Balance. So just keep deleting and keep going until your trial balance is empty. And one last thing, you still cannot begin the exercise until you remove all the rules, because the rules of the exercise are going to be different than the rules that we did when we were learning in the lessons. So don't forget to remove those. You have to click Transactions, Bank Transactions, Rules. Now, to remove the rule, it's very simple. You can select it, and then if you select it here, should be able to scroll over and edit. Okay, cancel. Should be able to find the pull down here next to edit. I don't know why it's not letting me get this nice pull down that you can only see a piece of, and it's not letting me scroll to the right the way it normally would in order to see the full right side of the screen. Oh, here we go. Okay. So we can go delete this rule, delete that rule. Okay. Now log back in fresh, and now you can begin the exercise unaffected by anything we previously did. Good luck, and I hope you get the right numbers. So to make the project simple, clear, and straightforward, you will use a different account from your chart of accounts and a different set of files. So first you have to download the files to import in order to participate in this project, and they are in the description field of this video as you're watching it on YouTube. You can click to download them right into your computer as I'm about to show, and then you import them into the practice account the way that we learned. Then you can participate in the activity. So the first thing you need to do is download the files that you will need to put on your computer to be able to participate in this practice test. The way to do that is to scroll down. If you're watching this video on YouTube, you scroll down till you see the description field here. It's the text right under the video. Now, to open it up, there should be a More or Show More button in the bottom right where you can click, and the description field will expand. So come all the way down below the table of contents, and you can see here are the links you'll need for the project, and you can just click on it, and however your browser is set to download to whatever file it downloads to or whatever folder, then you can open it up and use it for the project. So for example, once you download the instructions, you can open them up and you see in the Excel file you have the Instructions tab, the setup transactions that you would have to put in first, then these are the transactions that you would have to match after you import, then these are the rules that you would have to set up in order to make QuickBooks Online record them properly, and here are 4 remaining instructions that apply to transactions that are not covered by the rules. Now, the setup transactions show you what the trial balance should look like after you record the first 4 setup transactions. Then you will follow the rules step by step, and when you get to the remaining transactions that are not covered by the rules, you will see that after you enter these, you follow these 4 instructions to enter the remaining transactions, this is what your final trial balance should look like. And that's how you know you did everything correctly. So go ahead and download the files, follow the instructions step by step, and if you finish with these numbers, congratulations, you're an expert in importing transactions into QuickBooks Online.